Welcome to Books in Action. I'm Jim Horton. We're talking to the editors and designers of the Columbian newspaper. That's the newspaper of Columbia High School in South Orange, Maplewood. And with us are Ryan Thompson, who is the co-editor-in-chief, Allison Zimmer, also co-editor-in-chief, Gabby Francesco, who's the co-design editor, and Matthew Feldman, who's also a co-design editor. And I'd like to hold one of the copies of the paper up. This is the most recent issue of the paper. You notice that it's very beautifully designed, and they have an awful lot of very, very good content in it. So it's quite an interesting newspaper. First of all, let's start off and ask you to describe the Columbian for us. Is it the typical high school newspaper, or is it something a little different?
The Columbian is not your average high school newspaper. We spend a lot of time on this every day in school. We have periods devoted to the Columbian, designing, coming up with good stories, and making sure this paper comes out and is one of the best in the country.
Yeah, the paper really represents a fusion between the art and English departments at Columbia High School, which is very different from other high school newspapers around the country. Most rely solely on the writing and the articles that are produced, and sometimes they hire professional companies to come in and design the paper, whereas we really spend a lot of time with the art and the design aspects. So it becomes a really different thing, and we've kind of inspired other high school newspapers around the country to create a similar type of bonding between the two different departments.
One interesting thing about the Columbian is that it's almost completely student-run. The journalists and the design team work together, and our teacher is our guide, but he basically sits back and lets us do what we think is right.
That's wonderful. Matthew?
Yeah, I would just agree with what's been said. The Columbian's just extremely professional. When we look at the other high school newspapers throughout the state, the Columbian just seems different in that it's fair in its reporting and it's extremely well designed. So I would say that's what sets it apart.
How often does it come out? Let's go through the basics here.
The Columbian comes out, we aim for every month, but it's between every month and bi-monthly.
And who gets it?
Well, people from the community can subscribe to the paper, and also students and parents and faculty members can get it, and we try to distribute it to community members so that the community is really getting a good sense of who Columbia High School students are and what we're creating.
And what's your normal circulation in terms of size?
Usually it's about 20 to 24 pages. Sometimes we do larger issues, but mainly it's around 24 pages. That's what we found.
And you turn out several hundred, several thousand copies each time?
Several hundred. Our school is about 2,200, and usually we get about 1,800 copies made, and most of those are sold.
Oh, it's sold? Oh, I didn't know that.
It's only a quarter.
It's only a quarter. Oh, that's wonderful. I somehow thought that this was a paper that was done very much like many of the alternatives, where it's put out and people pick it up. So you actually do sell it. So you must have a whole department that handles all the subscriptions and cash flow and everything?
Yeah. Upstairs, the journalism classes handle that. They deal with kind of the basics of selling it and collecting the money and collecting the subscription forms.
But our paper, it's never based on profit. We want to make sure that everyone who wants a copy gets a copy, and our point is to make sure that almost everyone gets a copy. That's our main point.
Have you noticed at all, this is a problem in major newspapers, that there is a declining circulation. People tend to get their news from the internet or someplace else. Is that a problem at all, or because of the kind of news you do, that it's really something where the students do eagerly read the paper?
I think it depends on the content of the paper. Whether the cover and the feature attract the student will depend on how many copies we sell. We're not trying to be a New York Times for the students. We don't try to cover the national issues that will already be old by the time the paper comes out.
Right.
We cover more local student issues that they're not going to find anywhere else. We cover them with good reporting that dispels like rumors that go around the school about things. We let them see what's really going on.
Okay.
We also do have our times though when if there's a very important national issue, we focus on it. We did a pull-out in one of our features about Hurricane Katrina. And by the time that came out, it was still a very important national issue. And it was actually perfect because students were informed about things, and it was also had a section about opinions.
Okay.
I think we try to remain conscious of the fact that students aren't receiving their general news from the Columbian, so we try to approach things from a different angle. In the Katrina pullout, like Abby was talking about, we had an article about students who came to Columbia who were actually from Slidell, Louisiana. So that's something that people wouldn't really have heard about anywhere else. So we try to approach it from a different angle so that it becomes a unique article.
That's very good. I had understood that local news is probably the future of a lot of newspapering anyway. So essentially, what I'm understanding from you is that you're very good about collecting and disseminating the local news within Columbia High School. Is that a correct statement?
Yeah, I'd say that's fair.
Yeah. Let's go over some of the issues, and I'm going to jump ahead over some of the things that we're talking about because I thought some of the things you're dealing with here are quite interesting. This one that I had held up earlier is on safety and security in the school. Now, could you take me through what safety and security we're talking about here?
Well, safety and security is a huge issue at our school. Everyone has different opinions on what they think should be done about it. Everyone thinks that there's either too many security guards, not enough, too many cameras, not enough, too many fights, what can we do about it? So this paper really just explored the entire issue. If you see the cover, there's a picture of the room in our school which has monitors.
All the TV monitors, right?
Which I don't think a lot of students knew about. A lot of the kids in the class didn't know that such a room existed. So it's really exposing the truth about our security and how our administration handles, keeping the school safe.
Okay, and I think I heard someone say when we talked before this program ran on that you also have a few IT security or information technology security policies as well. Did I hear someone say that? Or maybe I didn't. Security, of course, is more than just, so you were talking principally physical security here, not computer security and other things like that, like people getting on the internet and going places where they shouldn't go.
Well, our internet is extremely protected, actually overly protected in the eyes of most people at our school. You can't go on many websites, so I think that our online security is pretty good, if that's what you're asking.
Okay, so then this was principally physical security. That's terrific.
Yeah.
Let me put this down and pick up another one that I thought was a very, very interesting edition that you did. And this one, if you can see it, is on the achievement gap. And take me through this, please.
The achievement gap last spring was a major issue that students raised with administration. The achievement gap is the gap between the test scores and the grades and the levels between black students and white students. And so, as part of our class project for people aspiring to be editors last year, we put together a special edition of the Columbian about the achievement gap at our school and all of the protests that have been going on, and really tried to show it in a fair and balanced light.
What kind of feedback did you get from this issue?
A lot of people were really happy that we took some time to explore this in depth. I think it's important to note also that when we kind of tackle these really controversial issues, we try to approach them with a combination of news stories and opinion stories, where we get student feedback and student input on what they think is best to be done or what they see as the problem, and also just the core facts, where there's information from the principals and the vice principals and the deans at our school. So we give students a combination of those things, which I think is really important.
Mm-hmm. How do you design for something that's somewhat controversial like this?
Well, usually it takes a good amount of brainstorming because we have to figure out what exactly the point we want to get across, and we want to make sure that it's going to, catch people's eye.
Well, this one has raised fists, which looks rather interesting. What were you trying to communicate here?
This was a paper last year that we didn't actually, work on for the cover, but I think the point here was just that everyone is kind of fighting for, their own personal success. On each person's wrist, there's, their level, and I think it's just kind of saying that this is everyone's issue to deal with.
Is this something that is a constant source of tension that would show up in the newspaper in future issues, for example, Matt?
Well, it's always an issue, but last year when this paper came out, it was extremely hot, and we didn't really have a choice whether to do something about it, because if we were to ignore it, that would be poor journalism. That was all that was really being talked about at our school at the time.
Okay.
So we actually stopped what we were doing and decided to come out with a special edition while we were producing another regular paper.
Let's take this one here. This one is a rather interesting graphic. As a matter of fact, I think I'd like to start with the graphic side of this one. Internet zombies. What were you trying to communicate here?
We took kind of a different spin with this paper. We used color, so we wanted to make sure that was going to be involved. And the feature about this was how internet has affected our culture, specifically our generation. And, we talked to our art person who came up with this idea, and I think it was very effective.
Mm-hmm. And what was the content on this, basically?
We had some pieces about instant messaging and students who are using that as different forms of communication. Some students who use it for homework help, and some who are using it to meet other people who don't go to our school, and just the various uses of the internet and how it's affecting communication also, in terms of, is it becoming less personal and less intimate? Are there dangers involved? So we were focusing on that, and I think the key part in that is that there's a question mark. Are we internet zombies or not? We kind of to make people think.
You left that one open for others to worry about.
Yeah.
I'm going to pull out one more here. This one looks more feature-ish in this case, although it's a very lovely design on the cover of it. Music that rocks our world. What were you trying to get at here, Matt?
Well, that was the last paper we made last year, so it's a pretty good one. It has, by the end of the year, you learn from all of your mistakes, and each issue it gets better and better. So the design in this issue is really superb, and the content is also good. It's just one of those issues where it's a light issue, but it's also something that everyone's interested in, because everyone likes music. They all like different types of music, but everyone is interested in new music and what they listen to. So they like to see things that they're into.
Do you take up issues such as people downloading and sharing? Would that be something that would come up in an issue like this?
Yeah, I think that there is an article on internet downloading and the ethics of it. Is it right?
Okay. Well, we're going to have to take a break here, and when we come back, I'd like to go through some how you all got started, among other things, in journalism. It's an addictive thing, journalism. I did it for some time myself before I went on to other things, and it's a wonderful craft. So we'll be back here in just a few seconds. We can just talk here.
I think you should wear a tie.
Dad, nobody wears ties to school.
Tie says you're serious. It'll make a good impression. And remember, you're there to study,
to learn, and to make something of myself. I got it.
Almost half of all UNCF students are the first in their family to go to college.
They have some great architecture classes.
Dad, I'm not really interested in architecture.
Well, keep your options open. And remember, no girls until your
my
work is done. And I'd make sure that I got my lunch.
Dad, you're not going. I am.
I know.
Listen, we better get going. Don't want to be late the first day in.
Oh, yeah.
And when you're the first to go, you're going for a lot of people. The United Negro College Fund. A mind is a terrible thing to waste.
We're back with Books in Action, and we're talking with the editors and designers of the Columbian, the newspaper of Columbia High School. And once again, I'd like to give all your names so everybody will know who you are. Right here, beginning on my left, is Ryan Thompson, who's the co-editor-in-chief, and next to him is Allison Zimmer, co-editor-in-chief. Gabby Francesco, the co-design editor, and down on the end, last but not least by any stretch, is Matthew Feldman, who's also the co-design editor. I'd like to start this period with asking you how you got started individually in journalism. What got you started? What made you interested to put in all the work that obviously you're having to put in to do this.
All right. Freshman and sophomore year, our English classes are the same for everyone, but for junior and senior years, we can pick our own English classes. And so sophomore year, I was looking through the junior English class offerings, and I wanted something different, something that wasn't a literature course. So I saw journalism, and I applied for the class. You have to, little short writing prompt and a task that you have to do. And I applied, and I got into the class. And I liked it so much that in the middle of the year, when it came time to choose the editors for the next year's paper, I decided to apply for that too. And here I am.
So what do you like about it? What is it the craft of writing, or is it just what is it about it that actually causes you to say, I really want to do this?
I think it's really interesting to go and find out what's going on and report on it and bring it to the school as a whole and inform people. And it's really different than any other writing that you do in high school. It's not essays about a book that you read or about a science problem you're doing. It's getting the facts and presenting them in an interesting manner for everyone to see.
So you have a natural curiosity of finding out what's going on out there.
You could say that, yeah.
Okay, that's terrific.
I've always been really fascinated by writing. I'm kind of an obsessive reader of books, and also the New York Times Magazine section especially. So I always knew that I was really interested in journalism. And when it came time to pick a class for my English class for junior year, I thought that journalism would be appropriate for me to take. And I'm really, I guess, even more than the hard news stories, I'm really interested in feature stories that look at things in a different light, and as well as exposing different pieces of information and facts about the school. I like to kind of look at things from a different perspective of how the students might be affected by certain things, and I like the feature aspect, so I thought that was a cool way to kind of get involved in that.
So are you the kind of an individual who walks around and says to yourself, would that make a good story? Are you one of those kinds of individuals?
Yeah, actually, last year in journalism class, we do a number of different pieces of writing as training that aren't even involved in the newspaper, but just to get kind of a journalism eye. And we did this one assignment called Tales in the Hall, where we just walked around and we had to pick 3 or 4 incidents of things we saw in the hallways that just struck us as interesting. And I was really intrigued by that, just kind of normal things, and you look at them in a different perspective, and they seem important when they're kind of isolated like that.
That's terrific. And Gabby, how did you get started in design that got you all the way to newspaper design?
My interest really started in my sophomore year. I took computer graphics. I kind of just picked it from a list of electives, thought it sounded interesting, didn't really know what I was getting myself into, and took the class midway through the year. I realized that I thought it was something I was good at, and I enjoyed doing it. And for the rest of the year, I talked to my teacher, Mr. Selden, and he wanted us to work on the Columbian for the next year. So junior year, me and Matt were both designers, and we learned how to express the importance of the articles through design, because the content is great, but people are going to want to make sure that it looks good. You have to see how to catch people's attention. So that's why I really became interested in magazine and newspaper design.
For the techies and who are watching this program, what sort of computer graphics programs are you working
Adobe
on?
Photoshop.
You're doing the big one then.
Right,
so
in
Adobe
design. Well, we make our pages in design, but some of us like to use Photoshop for graphics.
Well, that's terrific.
Yeah.
And how did you get started, Matt?
The same way as Gabby. I took the computer graphics class sophomore year, and then at the end of it, some of us say, that's not enough, we want to do more. Mr. Selden, the teacher who runs the class, is a real pro. So he gives us a lot of knowledge. He tells us at the end of the class that if we want to, we can go out and get a job and get paid thousands of dollars for the stuff he's taught us to do. So I think that turns some of us on, and we like to keep
the incentive.
right. So we continue on with it the next year, the Columbian.
That's great. What is a typical issues roster of stories? If I picked up any one of the issues that were here, well, actually, let's take the current issue, the safety and security. That's a special feature in it. But what would you have in a typical issue? Name the content for me.
All right, we have 7 sections in our paper. We start with the voices section, which is opinions. Then we go to hard news, more worldly news. Then we have community news.
And where do you find your world news and where do you find your community news?
Our editors brainstorm ideas for stories that they'd like to cover, that they think it's important that people know about. So that's how they get that.
So do you have something like an AP wire or anything within the school, or do you source this how?
From the news.
From the general run of the news.
From the general run of the news.
Okay.
From local newspapers like the News Record or the buzz around the school. Actually, the journalism classes, everyone in the class has 3 or 4 people that they're assigned to talk to in the school to get ideas from them for what they think should be in the paper, staff, administrators. So we get all of those lists and we run through those for story ideas.
So you have beats, in other words.
Yeah.
And each individual has 3 people on his or her beat.
Yeah.
Wow, okay.
But also, if I may add, what's cool about the Columbian is although we're design editors and they're content editors, everything is really done as a group. Like, we all sit down before the making of each next issue and we decide what we want to talk about. So if me and Gabby think that, school violence should be talked about, then we say it and it's listened to. And at the same time, if I'm designing a page and Ryan comes over and says, hey, I don't like the way that looks, I'll take it into consideration.
Yeah,
I'll usually tell him he's wrong, but I'll still listen.
It's really a very intimate setting, and that's what I think is really special about our paper is that everyone works together. And, our teacher, Mr. Selden, often calls us a family because we're working together, we're helping each other. We may critique each other, say maybe you should do it this way, maybe you should do it that way, but we always listen, and that's why I think it comes out so great.
Yeah, I think that the ultimate goal for everyone is just to accurately portray the school and students and what they're thinking. So everyone who's involved in making the paper and who's just a member of the school and the student body has valid opinions on what should go in. So we try to listen to everyone.
Well, I'm afraid I got off misdirected. I didn't let you finish the content. Allison, could you help us finish the sections?
Sure.
7 sections.
I think we left off on community news. We have sports also, where we focus on national sports, but primarily the school and how the sports teams are doing.
And you have a sports writer section?
Yeah.
Group
We have
of
a sports editor.
You
Yeah.
have a sports editor. Okay, very good.
And we have 2 special sections, feature and in-depth, where we kind of like to have some kind of theme for each of them, usually different themes, but sometimes they correspond to each other. And then we focus on those in a number of different articles where we really try to dig into them.
We also have an arts and entertainment section where we talk about culture in the school and nationally.
So what would be, say, taking the music section you just did, what would be the main featured music that you would be talking about right now? Would it be rap? Would it be what?
I think we try to get a broad scope. We try to get like the pulse of the student body, what they're interested in, but I think we try to come about it in a broad way where we can kind of get an idea for what everybody's listening to, not just the mainstream.
Okay. Once again, who does all the writing? Because a 24-page paper, that's a fairly significant news hole.
The members of the journalism class do the writing, and sometimes the content editors will have a few articles here and there. But at the beginning, it's just the content editors who are writing stories. And then once the journalism class students have really gotten a hang of journalistic writing, we pass on stories to them and we assign stories to them. They get to choose out of a list of stories we've decided we want in the next paper. And then the content editors work with the writers to make sure that it's journalistically and factually correct.
Do you ever get issues where it's considered a little hot, a little sensitive, that get on the list and you kind of have to say, gee, I'm not so sure we want to do that one?
I don't know if that's really stopped us so much in the past. We get the controversial issues, but we try to cover them in a way that's fair and balanced so nobody really can have much of a problem with it. We don't have to go through the principal looking over every paper before it comes out. We have our advisors, Mr. Selden, the design advisor, and Ms. McGrain, the content advisor, and they look over the pages before they go to print, but usually, or almost all the time, we get what we want in paper.
And what is your editorial process? I know you described one for me that seemed like you were being very careful about factual accuracy, and it goes through what, how many layers to make sure that everything's right?
Well, with person in journalism class writing for us, we have each person talks to their section editor. They submit a draft, and they get comments, and then it goes back to them, maybe for another draft. And then it goes down to our copy editor, who looks over it, and then they send it into the computer. It's put on the pages, and then that's looked over by Allie or I, or the copy editor again, and then Ms. McGrain sees it, and then it comes back to us. We make the changes, and then it goes out to print.
But every once in a while, I suspect there is an error or two that creeps in.
Yeah.
We critique at the end of each paper after it's been completed. We have a little party to celebrate, and we also critique the paper and go through and really go through kind of with a fine eye.
Scrutinize it.
To see the problems and things that we can improve for the next paper.
And in some newsrooms I've been in, they used to have a poster, a bulletin board where they put winners and sinners, which was a standard cliche where when the chief editor was very unhappy about something, that went into the sinners column. We're just about out of time. I wanted to ask you if there was anything in particular about the paper that you wanted to talk about just before we concluded this session.
One thing I really like about the paper is that it gives us a chance to show all sides of Columbia, not just maybe the bad things that might get news in the News Record or in the Star Ledger, but to show the good side of Columbia, all the good things that we can be proud of also.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think that we do a good job of getting student opinions in there. So people who are reading it in the community can look at it and really say, Columbia high school students know what they're talking about, and they really do care about their school and about world issues. And I think that that's important for people to realize who may kind of brush off Columbia High School.
Okay, well, I hate to say it, but we are out of time. So once again, I would like to have all of you, so everyone knows who you are. It's Ryan Thompson, right to my immediately left here. Allison Zimmer, both co-editor-in-chief of the Columbian newspaper, Gabby Francesco and Matthew Feldman. And I want to thank all of you, all four of you, for coming in and for talking with us. And it was a delight to meet you. You sound like you're doing a fabulous job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching us on Books in Action.